The way you speak is one of the most powerful reflections of who you are becoming. Jim Rohn often reminded us effective communication is 20% what you know and 80% how you feel about what you know. If you want to improve your personality and confidence, you must begin by mastering your words, because your words don't just influence others, they shape how you see yourself. The way you speak either builds you or breaks you. It either commands attention or invites dismissal, and it happens moment by moment, conversation by conversation. Speaking with clarity starts with thinking with clarity. You have to know what you're about. If your thoughts are scattered, your words will follow suit. But when your mind is sharp, your speech becomes powerful. That's why the first step to speaking well is knowing your message. What do you believe? What do you stand for? What value are you bringing into the room when you open your mouth? When you answer those questions, your voice gains direction. Now, many people confuse being loud with being confident. But volume isn't conviction. Confidence isn't noise. It's presence. It's certainty. When you speak with intention, people listen, not because you shout, but because your words carry weight. The most powerful personalities often speak slowly, clearly, and deliberately, not because they're unsure, but because they know their words matter. They're not in a hurry to impress. They're in command of their message. Another aspect of powerful speech is vocabulary. The better your words, the better your influence. If you want to elevate your personality, start expanding your vocabulary, not to sound impressive, but to become more precise. Jim Rohn would say, don't be lazy in language. Words are tools of influence. Every word you use is either painting a picture or creating confusion. The more clearly you speak, the more confident you appear. Clarity also means cutting the fluff. Avoid filler phrases like you know, or like when they don't serve a purpose. These weaken your message and signal nervousness or uncertainty. Be direct, be intentional. Confidence is knowing that silence is better than senseless words. And when you speak, speak to contribute, not just to fill the space. Every conversation is a chance to build or erode your presence. Take that seriously. Now, tone plays a major role in how your message is received. You can say the right words with the wrong tone and still miss the mark. So pay attention to how you say what you say. Is your voice shaky or steady? Is your tone warm or cold? Is your pace rushed or measured? People don't just hear your words, they feel them. And the tone behind your words often speaks louder than the words themselves. A confident speaker also listens well. Odd, right? But it's true. Those who listen more speak better. Why? Because they respond, not react. They adapt their message based on understanding. When you're truly engaged in the conversation, your words become more relevant, more respectful, and more persuasive. Listening adds depth to your personality. It shows emotional intelligence. It shows maturity, and that builds confidence in any room. Finally, remember this: your inner dialogue shapes your outer voice. If you constantly speak negatively to yourself, if your internal script is full of doubt, hesitation, or criticism, it will eventually show up in how you speak to others. But if you practice encouraging yourself, speaking with purpose in your own mind, you'll naturally project that same clarity and strength outward. The mouth can't speak what the mind doesn't believe. So start with your thoughts, align them with growth, and then let your words carry that message into the world with power. The way you carry yourself speaks long before your words do. People often decide how seriously to take you within seconds, not based on your resume, not based on your experience, but based on your posture, your appearance, and the energy you bring into a room. Jim Rohn believed deeply in this idea. How you present yourself is a daily reflection of how you feel about yourself. And when you want to improve your personality and confidence, how you look and how you stand are not just superficial details. They're essential signals. Posture is the physical expression of confidence. When you stand tall, shoulders back, head up, you communicate certainty, even if you don't feel it yet. And here's the truth. The body leads the mind just as much as the mind leads the body. If you slump your shoulders, avoid eye contact, and walk small, your brain begins to accept that posture as reality. You start to feel what you physically express. But the reverse is also true. If you adopt a posture of strength, you start to feel stronger. If you stand with presence, you begin to act with confidence. Jim used to say, learn to work harder on yourself than you do on your job. That includes the way you appear. Dressing well is not about fashion, it's about identity. It's about self-respect. It tells the world, I care about how I show up. You don't need expensive clothes to look sharp. You need intentionality. Clean, fitted, well-maintained clothes say a lot about your standards. When you take the time to put yourself together, your entire mindset shifts. You walk differently, you speak differently, you carry yourself with more certainty. Think about it. How do you feel when you're well-groomed, in a fresh outfit, and you know you've put in some care? You don't just look better, you think better. You walk into meetings, interviews, or even casual conversations with more assurance. That's not vanity, that's psychology. It's preparation meeting presence. And confidence is often the byproduct of preparation. The principle here is simple. Control the controllables. You may not be able to control every circumstance or outcome, but you can control your posture, your cleanliness, your grooming, your choice of attire. And doing that daily creates a baseline of confidence that spills over into everything else. You become more willing to speak up, more willing to engage, more willing to take risks. Why? Because you've already started your day with intentional choices that tell your brain, I'm worth showing up for. And it's not just about how others perceive you. It's about how you perceive you. When you walk by a mirror, you should be reminded of the person you're becoming, not with arrogance, but with pride. There's something powerful about looking yourself in the eye and knowing you showed up with purpose today. That builds trust with yourself. That builds momentum. This isn't about being obsessed with an image. It's about creating alignment between your inner values and your outer presentation. You can't claim to be someone who's building discipline, excellence, and growth if your outer appearance suggests neglect, laziness, or disinterest. It's all connected. When you treat yourself like a high-value individual, others start to follow suit. They may not even know why, but they respond to the cues you give off. Over time, these daily choices, how you stand, how you dress, how you present, become part of your identity. You no longer try to be confident, you simply are, because your habits reinforce it. You begin to live with congruence. You begin to carry weight when you enter the room. And not because you demanded attention, but because you've earned respect, one intentional day at a time. Feeding your mind daily is one of the most overlooked secrets to building real personality and deep confidence. Jim Rohn said it best, miss a meal if you have to, but don't miss your reading. Because while food nourishes the body, ideas nourish the mind, and it's what you feed your mind that will determine how you think, how you speak, and ultimately, how you live. You can't pour from an empty cup, and you can't lead with an empty mind. That's why daily reading, just a few pages, a few paragraphs, a few golden ideas, can completely reshape your confidence from the inside out. When you read consistently, you expose yourself to new thoughts, new perspectives, and new tools. And here's what happens. Your mind sharpens, your vocabulary expands, and your confidence grows, not from hype, but from understanding. Knowledge brings certainty. When you know something useful, when you've studied principles that actually work, you stand taller in conversations, you contribute more in meetings, you connect deeper with others. Not because you're trying to impress, but because you've got something to say that actually matters. Reading is also a daily reminder that you are still growing. That alone gives you power. Most people plateau because they stop learning. They leave school and believe the learning season is over. But personal growth is not seasonal, it's lifelong. And when you become a daily learner, you separate yourself, you create an edge. You walk into rooms with quiet confidence because you know you're not the same person you were yesterday. That progress builds belief. Jim often said, formal education will make you a living. Self-education will make you a fortune. Whether it's books, audiobooks, biographies, or personal development material, the information you consume will shape the person you become. And personality is shaped by philosophy, by the ideas you've accepted as true. If you're not feeding your mind deliberately, then you're letting the world feed it by default. And that's dangerous, because the world feeds you distraction, comparison, and fear. But a good book feeds you direction, clarity, and courage. It's not just what you read, it's how you apply it. You read to think better. You read to solve problems. You read to raise your awareness so you can spot opportunities when they come. You read to build principles into your character. Over time, you begin to notice patterns. Great thinkers all value the same things: discipline, vision, persistence, courage, integrity. And as you absorb those values, you begin to live them. That's how confidence is formed, by alignment between what you know and what you do. Daily reading also builds a rhythm. It becomes a quiet space in your day where you reflect, reset, and refocus. It reminds you of your goals. It reconnects you to the version of you that you're becoming. And when the world feels noisy and chaotic, that few minutes of focused learning can ground you again. It keeps you centered, and centered people move with more strength. Another benefit of reading: it improves your language, and language is power. The better you can express yourself, the more persuasive you become, the clearer your thinking, the clearer your communication. People trust those who communicate with confidence. They follow those who speak with clarity. Reading helps you build both. That's how you develop real influence, one word, one sentence, one idea at a time. So when you're working on your personality and confidence, don't start with the mirror. Start with your mind. Give it something worth thinking about every day. Let your ideas elevate your identity, because when your mind is strong, your confidence becomes unshakable. And it all begins with the discipline to read, learn, and grow every single day. One of the most powerful habits you can develop for improving both your personality and your confidence is keeping promises to yourself. This sounds simple, but it's one of the most consistently violated principles of self-development. Jim Rohn often said, discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. And keeping your word to yourself is a form of discipline that builds inner strength, trust, and personal integrity. You can't lead others until you learn to lead yourself. And leadership begins with self-respect. Every time you say you'll do something and you follow through, no matter how small, you cast a vote for the person you want to become. You reinforce a self-image of responsibility, reliability, and confidence. And the opposite is also true. When you say you'll do something and don't do it. When you hit snooze after you promised yourself you'd get up. When you skip the gym after committing to your health. When you break your own rules. You weaken that you send a message to your subconscious: I can't be trusted. That's where insecurity starts to grow. Not from the outside, but from within. Most people don't lack potential, they lack follow-through. And that gap between intention and execution is where confidence dies. But when you begin to close that gap, even with the smallest actions, your confidence starts to rebuild. You begin to feel proud, not just because of what you're achieving, but because of who you're becoming. You start to respect yourself again. And self-respect is the foundation of real confidence. It's not based on applause or attention. It's based on discipline. Keeping promises to yourself trains your mind to believe your words. When you say, I'll start at 6 a.m., and you do, it builds strength. When you say, I'll read for 10 minutes, and you follow through, it builds belief. It's not about perfection, it's about consistency. Jim Rohn taught that the pain of discipline weighs ounces, while the pain of regret weighs tons. And nothing is more painful than constantly breaking your own word. Another important aspect of this principle is identity. People act in alignment with who they believe they are. If you consistently break promises to yourself, you begin to see yourself as someone who tries but never finishes. You start to say things like, I'm just not that disciplined, or I'm bad at follow-through. But that's not who you are, it's just a habit, and habits can be changed. Start small. Start where you are, keep one promise today, then keep another tomorrow, let the habit compound. There's also power in writing your promises down. When you write something, you give it structure. You bring it into the physical world, a written goal, a written intention, a written commitment. It creates accountability. It's no longer just a vague wish in your mind. It becomes something you can see, review, and act on. And every time you check that box or complete that task, you build confidence. You're telling your future self, you can count on me. Keeping promises to yourself also affects how others see you. People can feel integrity. They can sense when someone has alignment between words and actions. And that's the kind of personality that earns trust, respect, and admiration. Confidence isn't about being loud or dominant. It's about being centered. And nothing centers you like knowing that your actions match your values. Over time, these small, kept promises stack up. They become the foundation of habits. The habits form routines. The routines build character. And your character becomes your destiny. You won't need to chase confidence or try to act a certain way. It will simply become who you are. Because when you trust yourself, everything changes. And that trust begins with one small promise, kept faithfully every single day. One of the most effective ways to improve your personality and build unshakable confidence is to shift your focus from trying to be interesting to becoming genuinely interested in others. This principle may sound simple, but it holds profound power. Jim Rohn once said, "The greatest gift you can give to someone is the gift of attention." And when you learn to truly listen and engage, you stop trying to impress people and start creating meaningful connection. That shift alone can elevate your presence in any room. People naturally gravitate toward those who make them feel seen, heard, and valued. When you take a sincere interest in someone, when you ask them thoughtful questions, when you listen without interrupting, when you're fully present, they walk away feeling better about themselves. And because of that, they associate that good feeling with you. That's how you build charisma without ever needing to dominate a conversation. Most people spend their time waiting for their turn to talk. They don't really listen, they pause. But when you genuinely focus on the other person, something interesting happens. Your confidence begins to grow because your attention is no longer consumed by your own insecurities. You're not worried about how you're being perceived. You're locked in on learning, understanding, and connecting. That takes the pressure off and allows your natural personality to come through. Being interested also means being curious. Develop the habit of asking people about their lives, their goals, their struggles, and their wins. Not in a nosy way, but with authentic curiosity. Ask what's something you're working on right now that excites you, or what's the biggest lesson you've learned this year? These types of questions open up rich conversations and show that you're not just surface level. You're engaged, you care, and people remember that. Now, this doesn't mean you have to agree with everyone or pretend to be fascinated by everything. It means you bring presence to every interaction. You make the person across from you feel like in that moment they matter, because they do. And when you develop the discipline to give people that kind of focused attention, your communication skills evolve, your empathy increases, your emotional intelligence deepens. These are all traits that form the backbone of a magnetic personality. It's also important to realize that being interested helps you learn faster. Every person you meet knows something you don't. They've had experiences you haven't, and when you listen, you gain access to insights that no book or course can give you. Confidence doesn't always come from what you know. It also comes from how much you're willing to learn. And people love teaching someone who listens well. They open up, they share, and that sharing becomes a source of wisdom for you, which in turn sharpens your worldview. In social situations, the one who's genuinely interested never has to fight for attention. They receive it naturally. And in professional settings, this trait becomes even more valuable. Clients, leaders, teams, they all respond to someone who makes them feel understood. When people feel that you're for them, not just focused on yourself, they're more likely to trust, collaborate, and follow your lead. Being interested also softens your personality. It removes the edge that comes from trying too hard. It replaces performance with presence. And ironically, the more you shift the focus off yourself, the more people are drawn to you. Not because you tried to shine, but because you reflected their light back to them. This daily practice of being interested doesn't require extra talent, education, or resources. It just takes intention, a choice to show up, pay attention, and ask a little more than you answer. And when you live this way, confidence doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room. It comes from being the most present one. That's a personality people never forget. Confidence isn't always loud. In fact, some of the most powerful confidence is quiet, calm, and deeply rooted in discipline. Jim Rohn often spoke about the difference between being kind and being weak, about how strength isn't in volume but in character. Developing quiet, assertive confidence isn't about being the center of attention. It's about being centered within yourself. And that kind of confidence comes from doing the work no one sees, from living in alignment, and from building personal strength through discipline. Assertiveness begins with self-awareness. You know where you stand, and you don't need to prove it in every conversation. When you have quiet confidence, you don't chase validation, and you don't fold under pressure. Instead, you move with purpose and speak with intention. This doesn't mean being passive or reserved. It means choosing your moments, controlling your energy, and letting your presence speak even when your mouth is closed. Discipline is the daily foundation for that kind of inner certainty. When you get up on time, when you follow through, when you live by your own standards, your mind begins to trust your decisions. You stop second-guessing yourself. You no longer need applause to know you're doing the right thing. Confidence grows in the dark, before the results, before the compliments, before the rewards. And that's where discipline does its best work. It shapes you quietly and consistently long before anyone else notices. Most people try to act confident without building the foundation for it. They memorize scripts, adopt postures, and recite affirmations, but without daily follow-through, all that effort feels hollow. True confidence isn't something you turn on when you walk into a room. It's something you carry because of the way you've trained yourself to live. If you've skipped the discipline, the confidence won't last. It'll fall apart under challenge. But if you've done the work, if you've built strength through repeated habits, your confidence becomes unshakable. One reason quiet, assertive confidence is so powerful is because it's rare. The world is full of noise, posturing, and overcompensation. But when someone walks in calm, focused, and in control of themselves, people take notice. They listen. They follow. That person becomes a leader not because of charisma, but because of composure. You can develop that composure, and the path is discipline. It's the early mornings, the focused work, the uncomfortable conversations, and the commitment to keep growing when it would be easier to quit. Quiet confidence also comes from knowing you can depend on yourself. You don't need to broadcast your goals to feel motivated. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone because you've proven it to yourself. That internal stability allows you to say no when needed, to hold your ground with respect, and to walk away from anything that doesn't align with your values. That's the strength of someone who doesn't need attention. They command respect. And this kind of confidence gives you freedom. Freedom from the fear of judgment. Freedom from needing constant reassurance. Freedom to show up exactly as you are and contribute from a place of value. When you're not trying to impress anyone, you show up more authentically. That's where real personality begins to shine, not as an act, but as an expression of who you've become through consistent, quiet effort. Jim Rohn taught that success is something you attract by the person you become, and becoming that person, strong, confident, disciplined, doesn't happen overnight. It happens through repeated choices, daily focus, and a commitment to growth when nobody's watching. Over time, those private victories lead to a public presence that people respect, admire, and remember. Quiet confidence is the reward of a life well managed and a character well built. Improving your personality and building true confidence isn't about putting on a show. It's about doing the quiet work within. It's in the way you speak with clarity, carry yourself with purpose, feed your mind daily and keep the promises you make to yourself, It's found in how genuinely you connect with others and in the quiet strength that comes from self-discipline. These are not tricks or shortcuts, they're timeless habits. And when you commit to them day by day, you'll find that confidence doesn't need to be chased. It begins to show up naturally because it's built on something real.